Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Rod sent me a note about a troubling development in the field of traffic enforcement, and this does worry me. This does worry me, although it would never affect me, I don't think. But from the New York Post, traffic cameras can now ticket you for having a loud car. So it's not so much a traffic camera as a traffic microphone, I guess, that measures loudness. And I'm not speaking about the Japanese band. I'm talking about how loud your car is, or your vehicle, that matter. Albert Curry wrote the story for the Post. You know you're under surveillance at the airport, in the bank, or at a federal building. But watchful eyes extend far beyond that. Of course, depending on where you live, the government might be keeping tabs on you from the moment you leave home. Traffic cameras have been around for decades, capturing photos of your car and license plate. Now, here's the thing. I also got an article, I might talk about this later, but somebody sent me an article about how in Michigan, the state police are now setting up license plate readers all over the place. And the thinking is that they just record license plates as cars drive by, and if a crime's committed in the area, they can go back and double check that license plate reader to see what it picked up. And they pointed out there are some crimes that they could have solved if they had those things in place when they didn't. But of course, the more data and information they gather on you, the more it starts to feel like Big Brother, you know? So they can use that information also, of course, to catch you for speeding or running a red light or driving an unregistered vehicle. And now here's the thing. This varies wildly from state to state. Michigan does not have, like, say, speed cameras. I know some places have got speed cameras, but no red light cameras. Other places have got red light cameras, but no speed cameras. And there are problems with all of them. But every time I mention this, people always say, well, Steve, if you don't speed, you got nothing to worry about. So you've never sped, never gone 1 mile an hour over the speed limit. So you're the person in the left lane clogging up traffic, right? That's you? Okay, just checking. Well, we've also heard of red light cameras that occasionally trigger falsely. Like when people make a legal right turn on red. The camera goes, oh, you went through the red light. There's a photograph of you crossing the line right there. Yeah, I was making a right turn on red. It doesn't look like it because in the picture you're not moving. That's how pictures work. So it depends on where you are. And I know some people have learned to live with these things. Other states are like, what are you talking about? And that's kind of where I am right now, except for the license plate readers that are coming to Michigan. But this one's even trickier because I understand the idea that if you're speeding and there's a radar gun type thing that can measure how fast you're going and it determines that you're speeding and there's a certain threshold they set it to and they can photograph your car and your license plate. I understand the concept of that. But if something goes by that's noisy, how does it know what's making the noise? And I know you're going to say, but Steve, they can point these microphones. Really? Microphones? What is a microphone? No, I'm just kidding. I understand that. But you also know that with sound, it's very, very different. To the point where I've heard these big debates break out about whether or not a vehicle or a motorcycle is too loud because it depends on how far away you are and where you're standing. Sound does tend to project in one direction and not another. So if you're measuring the loudness of my voice from right back here, it doesn't sound like I'm bellowing the way I actually am. So now lawmakers have added a new feature to speed cameras, sound meters. Sound meters to record the volume of passing vehicles. Cities have ordinances, of course, regarding noise, and you can get a ticket for anything from loud parties to the excessive racket from construction, and cars fall under the purview of many locales as well with respect to the traffic code. And there are stories about people who modify the exhausts on their vehicles for some reason, or modify the exhausts on their motorcycles for some reason, and the resultant sound is louder than what it came from the factory with. Although recently, there was a famous story out of California where a guy who had a car that was equipped with a factory exhaust, if you put it in a certain mode, a police officer would say, oh, that's too loud. That's too loud now. And it doesn't matter that that's a factory exhaust. So debates can break out in that manner also. But the interesting thing is that you almost never hear of people actually being ticketed for sound. And I'm not making this up. I've handled over 1,000 traffic citations in my career. Over 1,000, easily. And I can actually document that. And you might go, wait, Steve, 31 years in legal practice, over 1,000 tickets. Really? Yes, I did them in bulk after the Woodward Dream Cruise. And believe it or not, even at the Woodward Dream Cruise, I never saw anybody get ticketed for noise, at least not coming from the exhaust. I think I may have heard of somebody being ticketed for spinning their wheels and that making too much noise, but usually they'll get you for something else on that. But I've never actually had someone call me and say, Steve, I got a ticket for a loud exhaust. Will you represent me? I understand that someone in the audience right now is going to make a comment and say, Steve, I got a ticket for a loud exhaust. I understand it. It has happened, but it's not that common of a thing until the machines take over. So cities have ordinances regarding this. You can also be pulled over and ticketed if your car is too loud, as noted. Police use a decibel meter to measure the noise from your exhaust. These noise ordinances target modified vehicles mainly because the feds have all kinds of standards for what cars can and cannot do from the factory to be legal on the streets. Everything from, crash protection to fuel economy to the sound level of the car. So, or truck, or motorcycle, you name it. So the Stop Loud and Excessive Exhaust Pollution Act, or the SLEEP Act, was passed last year to increase enforcement against motorists and repair shops that illegally modify mufflers and exhaust systems to make them excessively noisy. So someone passed a statute. Now, New York City, which already has strict laws against noise, that's funny. That is really funny. I've spent the night in New York City. If they've got laws against excessive noise, they're not being enforced. They're not, okay? So they started a pilot program last year to catch loud cars and motorcycles via traffic cameras equipped with sound meters. Loud vehicles can be fined up to $800 for breaking the law, according to the Associated Press, and that's on the first offense. Penalty rises to $2,625, and then, of course, it can go from there, and it gets worse if you were to ignore a hearing, for instance. So if you get one of those tickets, you should respond to it, and then you may also want to find out where those things are and avoid them in the future, or fix your exhaust. At least 71 drivers have been caught by the sound measuring cameras so far. And again, I think that's a misnomer. If I were to say that a camera measured sound, I would get hundreds of comments from people going, Steve, cameras have nothing to do with the sound. That's the microphone. So I'm merely pointing that out. But also, of the 71 drivers who've been ticketed, how many of them rolled over and paid versus how many of them fought it? I'm curious to know that. Those programs currently running in New York City. Other cities might see a potential benefit from adopting a similar program there. And also, as we all know, it ain't about the sound. It ain't about the red lights. It ain't about the speed. It's about raising revenue. That's all this ever is. So if it's another way to raise revenue, because let's face it, an $800 fine for a first offense, which is basically an equipment ticket, on the sound of your car. $800. That's a steep ticket, my friends. So drivers are worried that traffic cameras may snap photos of the loud vehicles without modifications. And as noted, suppose there's like two motorcycles side by side, and there's a camera right here looking at them, and a device with the camera recording or measuring the sound off those bikes. And one of the bikes has a modified exhaust, and one of them does not. Can it really tell which is which? Or does it just ticket them both and let God sort it out? So some drivers use aftermarket parts that raise the sound of their cars to the point that it can damage the hearing of people around them. I've always also wondered about the guys who get their bass and their woofers and their big speakers in the back, and the whole car is just thump, 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 going down the road. And again, you can do whatever you want with your car. I am a automobile libertarian. Knock yourself out, whatever you do. I am convinced that there's some people who've got it so loud inside their cars that it actually causes them physical harm. If it's that loud, outside. I'm assuming most of the sound is focused inside, but they're saying here that some drivers actually do it where it can damage the hearing of the people around them. Now, I've never heard a car in traffic where I thought to myself, boy, that's going to physically harm my hearing. And I've been near some loud vehicles. I have. I've also been to the hydroplane races in Detroit, on the Detroit River near Belle Isle, where they've got, at one point in time they were racing boats that had Allison aircraft engines in them, and then they upgraded those to big old turbine engines, which are quite loud. But also, I have, for instance, been standing next to Bobby Isaac's K&K Daytona indoors when it was fired up. And I was standing next to where the pipes come out. You ain't lived until you've heard a crate Hemi with pipes about that long fired up indoors with those pipes down by your feet. It was loud. And like I said, I understand what loud means. That's loud. However, I don't think, like I said, having been to like the Woodward Dream Cruise many, many times, or many other car shows, have I actually ever heard a car where I thought, wow, that's going to hurt my ears. But according to this article, some drivers use aftermarket parts that raise the sound of their cars to the point that it can damage the hearing of people around them. So the question is the solution more surveillance and more enforcement like this, or should it actually come down to police officers driving around as part of the traffic enforcement duties, spotting a vehicle that is obnoxiously loud and asking themselves, is that vehicle too loud? If so, maybe I should pull it over and issue a ticket of some sort. And that's the biggest complaint I've got about the speed cameras, the red light cameras, and all these other things that we've got doing surveillance, is that these are machines that are just doing things they've been told to do. And a police officer at the side of the road can exercise discretion. Now, it doesn't always work out well for you, but the point is that there's a human in the equation. And as anybody knows who's ever tried to fight City Hall, when you're trying to fight a ticket generated by a machine, and they send you a notice in the mail that says, here's a photograph of you, you owe us money, pay it. If you want to fight that, it becomes a much different thing than if you got a ticket and you want to fight it, and you go in and like I said, you'd be talking to the cop at the side of the road first, then you get the ticket, and then you go into court and talk to the cop or the prosecutor or the judge or an attorney or whatever you're going to do. But the point is, there's a lot of stuff you can do, but I like the equations that have humans in them making decisions, at least early on in the process, as opposed to just going, oh, we'll have this machine sit here. Anytime a loud sound peaks over a point, it'll just take a photograph and ticket somebody. And I'm not sure how accurate that's going to be, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's a way they've got to do it where it's going to be completely accurate. And at which point I still kind of wonder about it. I really do. So there you go. But Rod, thanks for sending it to me. Again, it's a dark image of our future from the New York Post. And Albert Curry wrote this. Traffic cameras can now ticket you for having a loud car. Oh, joy. Questions or comments, put them below those. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
Loneliness is to be avoided. Solitude is to be sought.